What can people leaders in the corporate world learn from an Olympic-level sports psychologist? Dr. Amy Athey shares her advice that has helped professional athletes and business leaders maximize their performance.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture and Profit podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com. As we record today's episode, the 2024 Paris Summer Olympics are taking place. Today we have an impressive performance psychologist joining us who has consulted Olympians. Let's welcome Dr. Amy Athey. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you both. It's great to be here.
We really are so excited, and the timing of the Olympics and your experience is so cool. Dr. Athey is a licensed clinical and performance psychologist and national leader in performance psychology, leadership, crisis intervention, and developing non-traditional mental health and wellness programs for organizations. For over 20 years, she has consulted with NCAA champions, Olympians, professional athletes, C-level executives, and U.S. Special Forces, as well as served as a leader in scaling wellness and performance services. And contributing to the field as a performance psychology subject matter expert, Dr. Athey has delivered over 130 publications and presentations on high performance, strengthening teams, and wellness solutions, and was named a fellow in the Association for Applied Sport Psychology as national leader in high performance and wellness.
Very impressive.
Incredible.
Thank you.
So yeah, tell us a little bit more. What drew you to this career?
We were just talking, like when I pause and reflect back, it's really been one of those winding journeys. I actually was a collegiate athlete myself. I played basketball as an All-American basketball player at Roanoke College. And if I had only heard of performance or sports psychology during that time, but I did not. I actually was a business major in undergrad. Okay. And, I'm dating myself a little bit, but the internet came about right around my time of graduation. And, I, for an internship, was stuck in a closet doing spreadsheets, and that isolative, highly quantitative analytical space just wasn't a great fit. I am a people person. I appreciate the role the relationships have in our lives, and whether that's in the pursuit of your athletic dreams or your professional career in another industry, I needed to be out of that closet, if you will. So I actually joined the AmeriCorps program, service program out of undergrad, had an opportunity to work in inner city Baltimore with at-risk youth, their families, children who had lead poisoning. And I came just to appreciate the role and the service of being there for others who are looking to make changes to improve their lives, whether those are vast changes or micro changes. I really loved that serving in that capacity. So went back for my graduate studies, first a master's and then a doctorate, and really was incredibly grateful. I have to give kudos to a very good friend and colleague, Dr. Jessica Moeller, who, speaking of the Olympics, is the USA sailing sports psychologist. So we're going to give a huge shout out to them today as they are racing for a podium spot.
So exciting.
She introduced me to the field of sports psychology. She was ahead of her time, had already completed her master's in kinesiology at College Park under the training of Dr. Brad Hatfield. And I learned a ton. And at that point in my graduate training, it became a perfect blend of my personal journey, the space that athletics held for me and all that it gave me, as well as now kind of coming into this new training and career field in athletics. So that's where I got my start. Had a pit stop in my career working with crisis intervention, if you will. Loved that work in disaster psychology. although I was really challenged in reflecting on whether or not I could sustain that for a 30-year career. The work is incredibly intense, although rewarding. And so when I came into collegiate athletics, it was a blend where I could still use those crisis intervention skills. Unfortunately, you know, we have crises in athletics. Those things happen. But certainly that wasn't the sole focus of my role. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey working with high performers in sport, military, and business. So.
Holy cow. Yeah, I can imagine the crisis intervention can feel very heavy at times, depending on, you know, what you're dealing with. But that's also a critically important thing for people and for society, and being able to help people in these super high stress environments, whether it's sport or business or in the military. You know, there are moments where you really have to make sure your actions are what you want them to be intentional and take things to the next level. So tell us a little bit about, like, what was it like when you're coaching this Olympian or this, you know, top tier pro athlete or someone in the Navy SEALs? Like, what does that look like, and how are you helping them, you know, take their performance to the next level?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's evolved over time, really. The role of sport and performance psychology in these high performance organizations. If I go back to the earliest points in my career in the early 2000s, many of us were really paving the way to find jobs, to find opportunities to serve in athletic departments. We had the core elite organizations like the USOC, USOPC. We had some organizations that were truly those innovators and really were looking for the next kind of new way of helping people optimize their craft. But in the early 2000s, it really wasn't like it is now on LinkedIn. You pop up and you see a mental performance coach or a sports psychologist opportunity. In the early 2000s, I would argue that many found sports psychologists because of a problem incident, right? An athlete was arrested for a DUI, or there was a highly visible, highly critiqued negative outcome that we wanted to bring in resources for. Fortunately, we have evolved, and we have now come to a point where it is not just a reactionary service or pursuit. Really, where we have evolved now in high performance organizations such as an NCAA athletic department or a Navy SEAL team group, it is seen as a core component of an interdisciplinary human performance team. We have recognized early on strength and conditioning coaches are needed. Why? Yes, many will say we need elite performers to be stronger, more explosive. The reality is we also need to prevent injury. And so if we're tasking athletes or SEALs with these incredibly demanding, high pressurous physical challenges, we need to ensure that they can sustain that performance over time. So strength and conditioning came on the scene. We have strength and conditioning coaches now that are certified in that profession. We also then came to appreciate the role of nutrition, supplementation, hydration. So we saw the growth of the performance dietitian, performance nutrition field. Also certified registered dietitians who have gone to specialize in human performance and working with athletes, our special forces. And then certainly we recognize the mental component that comes with performing in these moments that matter and sustaining that performance over time. So now what you have, I think when I first started, there were 65 Power 5 schools. Maybe half had, this was in the early 2000s, maybe half had one sports psychologist. When I entered the Pac-12 after my journey from the ACC, SEC, I think the FTE, which is full-time equivalents, number of positions, on average was barely over one. And that was heavily weighted because USC was a front runner with always having a number of sports psychologists. They were kind of the first on the scene with that. When I left the Pac-12 and transitioned out as chief wellness officer, that number has significantly grown, and now there's probably 2.8 to low 3 FTE average in what used to be the Pac-12. So it has certainly grown, and a critical contributor of the human performance service team. And sports psychologists are trained to be able to provide training, coaching, and mental health service. So if you think of high performance on a continuum, a lot of people like to ask me, well, are you a clinical psychologist or are you a performance psychologist? I'll give props to a renowned sports psychologist, the USOPC, Dr. Sean McCann, whose quote is, "At this level, it's all performance." If someone is going through a divorce, we'd like to think once you step across that line, we leave that thing. Humans aren't like that. Like, we bring our whole selves to what we are doing. And so if you're dealing with an adjustment issue, if you're dealing with a clinical disorder like sleep apnea, depression, an anxiety disorder, we treat that no differently than we do recovering from a hamstring strain or an ACL repair. So we, as sports psychologists, serve on more of the clinical end. We also look to help with adjustments, transitions. We're talking a lot about the athletics, the Olympics now, but what's really challenging oftentimes for Olympic athletes is what happens when the Olympics end. It's another 4 years. There's this like ramp up, complete focus, attention. Your life is driven to this moment, and then like that stops. And so they serve an important role, not just in the execution portion of performance, but also in helping what we call after action. Okay, now what? And how are we learning from that performance? It could be micro, could be long term. So yeah, I've loved being part of the growth of the field. It brings enormous pride to see this being now standard for high performance organizations rather than just if something bad goes wrong. And we're seeing the impact of that. We have statistics now, not just for performance optimization and knowing that preparation, mental training aids in optimizing your performance, but I think even more significantly, and certainly for those corporate athletes out there, in your career sustainability. We have data from major league players those who worked with a performance psychologist on average lasted 2 more years in the big leagues than those who had not had service. So whether it's performance optimization, performance sustainment over the career, it's just really exciting to see how far the field has come and the young talent and the innovative thinkers coming together now, and it's just going to continue to grow.
Yeah, that's quite a significant amount of growth. I mean, from not that long ago.
Not that long ago.
Really, though. I mean, not being even a thing or barely being used, and now it is everybody has that, has access to that, and it's crucial in their performance. It is critical. So yeah, tell us a little bit. So you have all this past experience, and then now this has led you to found Athey Performance. So how are you applying this sports psychology knowledge into this workplace setting?
Yeah, so along my journey, I've received like inbound requests for speaking events or training, helping kind of augment or contribute to training programs, or even provide some coaching for corporate executives around ways that they could optimize their performance, strengthen their leadership skills, or help them, optimize their teams. And so at the start of this year, made the decision to kind of pull together really how I've always worked, even though it's been internal to organizations, but really have found to be the most impactful. And that is bringing and making accessible the holistic interdisciplinary performance team to those corporate executives and their teams. And, I recognize that every organization, team, or leader may be at a different spot in their needs for that. There are some who are looking to have that kind of deep dive knowledge, or kind of just at least plant the seed. And so we do offer those speaking events around high performance, whether that's preparation, execution, or how you can optimize your team and continuing and sustaining that high performance over time. We have some executives and their teams who are looking to kind of take a little bit deeper dive and build out training programs, whether that's a large enterprise company who has an existing training department, if you will. They have already hypo programs, or they have other leadership development programs. We are able to come in and augment their offering. Smaller to mid-sized companies, we really enjoy the co-creation and working collaboratively with that corporate partner to build that training program. And then there's some executives who recognize that there are specific areas that they really want to work on, and we know behavior change takes time, and that coaching service really helps. The way I have always explained it to the elite performers I'm working with, I'm certainly not an expert on what it means to be a Navy SEAL and clear a room. I'm not an expert in pole vault or being a football quarterback. But I do have this expertise from my research and then clinical, practice, that hopefully we can collaborate and share together. And not only are they expert in their performance domain, they're the expert on them. And through that collaboration, hopefully then we cut their trial and error, exponentially. And so we have, in that collaborative coaching process, executives are able to work with someone like me, work with our performance nutritionist, performance coach, physical coach for recovery planning. Oftentimes what they're seeing is like, oh, well, they're very smart, very action-oriented, very driven individuals, but they find that the service really enables them to make those changes and sustain those changes that they're looking to make in their lives, more effectively. So it's exciting to make it accessible to the private industry, because as I mentioned, we've seen the growth and the impact in these other performance domains like special forces and sport.
That's very, very impactful. And I think, it's not just these high impact organizations like professional sports and the military that can benefit from a holistic approach to enhancing and optimizing individuals' performance. Like you've got, a financial analyst that essentially is influencing millions or potentially billions of dollars, depending on the scale of the business, or executives who are, shaping strategy for companies that impact entire industries. I mean, there's obviously different scale depending on the industry, the business and organization, and even nonprofits are, making a difference in people's lives and communities. There's always a ripple effect that can be felt for better or worse with the performance of individuals. One question that I've been having as we've been having this conversation is, it seems in these high performance organizations that the organization itself has a very vested interest in maximizing the performance of individuals and the sustainability of that performance over time. But the reality is, in the workplace, a lot of organizations don't have that intentionality, or maybe they don't have the resources, or maybe it's just too much. Maybe the organization isn't as sophisticated or advanced yet. So what do you say to the people leader or even the individual team member to help them better own the performance of their team, or even themselves? Maybe I'm just sitting here listening saying, man, now I'm aware of this vacancy and resources that could benefit me. What do I do?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think sometimes we don't give enough credit to the impact that we as individuals have on our team and on others. You mentioned community, the ripple effect. It is present. I talk about with leadership, there's a lot out there about changing culture. You know, I appreciate the need to change cultures at times if they are dysfunctional, if they're just really undermining the pursuit of those goals or misaligned with an individual's or team's values. But what I hone in on when I'm speaking with leaders, people leaders especially, is let's pay attention to climate. So you may be, you know, a lead of a sales team, for example, and you may not have the resources to hire someone like me or our team. Nonetheless, there's a ton that you can do just in the interactions you may have with the individuals or as a collective in the team in a group environment. And whether it might be as minuscule as like pausing before you hit that send button on that email and taking a breath and maybe just throwing in drafts for another 10 minutes and coming back to it. Maybe it is how you respond to criticism or conflict, or just even challenging different thoughts within that group environment. How you respond in those moments that matter. Moments that matter are not always the ones that we're seeing on TV right now with Olympians. Most of us, they're not. Moments that matter could be when you come home to your child after a really long day of kind of feeling beaten down in the world. The 4-year-old doesn't really care or even understand what your email correspondence was. So what I say to people leaders is, don't underestimate the impact that we can bring in these moments that matter, that aren't always the highly visible, highly, you know, spoken about kind of headlines. And so we come back to 3 core performance tenets, if you will, to help performance leaders in those moments that matter. The first one, our foundational one, is one cannot perform if not well. Wellness is a foundation of performance. So if you're looking to engage in that with that 4-year-old after just kind of feeling beaten down in the day, I'm really curious of what your wind down routine is and your transition routine from work to home. How do you decompress? Even if it's a 10-minute train ride, even if you end up stuck on the bridge because there's an accident and now you're delayed another hour. Like, what is your wind down routine that's optimal and ideal? And in sport, we do this. If there's a rain delay, we have a delay routine. We then have a stretch routine. So now the rain delay, lightning again, you got another 45 minutes you got to wait. And we also have a shrink routine. Believe it or not, there have been teams that are late to the World Series because there were traffic jams and they were late getting to the field.
Oh my
and
God.
Those athletes had to still warm up in a very, very compact warm-up schedule. So for you, what is your wind down routine after work? What does that transition routine look like? How are you going to adjust if you're stuck in traffic? How are you going to adjust if, you know, get home and it's a zoo? So wellness is a foundation of performance. We look at active recovery for that. Obviously, sleep is critical, but other active recovery strategies. We look at how are you taking care of your fueling, nutrition, supplementation, hydration. We take a look at how are you honoring your spirit growth and your mental health. Basically, that holistic piece that we were talking about earlier. The second performance tenet we like to talk about is what got you here won't keep you here. So for those people leaders, the reality is you are working and living in a dynamic condition. And depending on your industry, it may be incredibly fast paced. I mean, my heart goes out to those in tech with this whole AI thing. I feel like there's another. And again, I'm of the generation, I dated myself with not having the internet in college. But we are in a very dynamic, ever-changing moment. And that is where these core mental skills, I really think, I use the metaphor a ton around what's in your toolbox. As a people leader, what is in your toolbox to regulate your emotion? What is in your toolbox to focus on what's most important now? We use the acronym WIN, what's important now. Because there is so much noise out there just in our lives now, the available noise. that can distract us from what's important now. So emotional regulation, attention. We also talk about how you bounce back. We talk a lot about mistake management and decision-making, quality decision-making, and then elements of high performance teaming. But the reality is what got you here won't keep you here. And just as we see it in private industry with product development, I get a new iPhone release every 10 months now, I think, or something. You know, if they had rested on their laurels and threw out the first one and say, hey, we're good, this is the greatest thing ever, like they'd be out of business. How do we do that as people leaders ourselves? We reflect, we kind of take inventory of our values and where we want to go, and maybe think of one or two very discrete actions that we want, or kind of that's the goal of our behavior. We go out and we try it. And then guess what? We do the whole cycle again, where we take pause, we reflect what went well, what seemed to help us, where did we misstep, or what did we learn that we want to do differently? We use that data, reflect on our values, align our actions, set out on our goal, and we keep kind of iterating. So that iteration is crucial. And then the last one, which is dear to my heart, and certainly I've only seen reinforced by the literature and practice, is relationships are the agent of change. No one will get on that podium at the Olympics alone. You may visibly see one person, but the reality is that the support, and they will all say this, is tremendous for leaders, for high performers who are in this really deliberate is not even the correct word, but just this intense pursuit of their craft. So I challenge people leaders to take inventory. Who's in your circle? And I was just watching a video with Simon Sinek the other day, and he made a really great point. He was like, you know, many of us may have 5, 10 friends that if shit really goes wrong, we're calling. You know, every place I've lived around this country, I can tell you, they weren't always a person I hung out with every Friday, but somehow in my life, I came to cherish relationships that if something happened with my kids, I knew I could call this person. And it didn't matter where they were in the world, they would help me. He also, Simon Sinek made a point though. He asked, how many of those 5 to 10 people on your list do you call when you got an award? How many of those people do you call when you absolutely crushed it? You crushed that quarter. And yeah, you're going to get your bonus check, but how many people do you call and celebrate those wins with? And I think a lot of times we hold back, right? Out of the fear of being judged as being cocky or arrogant or showing off or rubbing it in your face. And I just really appreciated his point there, that for our people leaders, for all of us, relationships are critical. It's the antidote for resilience in tough times. But I would also argue when we celebrate our wins, we kind of put those deposits back in ourselves. Those people in our circle, they're genuinely happy for us too. So it is also a gift that you're giving to them to be able to celebrate you in those times. So long-winded answer, perhaps, Matt, to your question, but certainly we've come to kind of find the power in those 3 performance tenets, and really are able to share that, whether we're giving a talk, helping with a training program, or coaching the corporate athlete.
I like that. And honestly, it sounds like, you know, an individual could kind of go through this reflection inventory, if you will, for themselves in their own life, their own relationships, how they're approaching delays and setbacks and mistakes. And a team leader could take the initiative to promote or prompt their team to do the same. And there's, I think, correct me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong here, or if you have more perspective, but there's benefit from kind of the self-evaluation of this, but also having a coach or a team lead or someone who sees outside of yourself to also provide some thought on how things are going. So
absolutely, the self-reflection, that's one data point, a valuable one, but certainly where are you also, you know, taking in data? And you, like you said, coaching is incredibly powerful. Mentorship, allies, supports, your supervisors, your faith leader, your partner, your friends, have kind of the diversity of data points, and it'll help kind of shape that stronger picture. And I think that's when we think about wellness and performance, the power that comes from the integration. I admittedly, I will be the first to, I cringe when I see the PowerPoint presentation that pops out about how to manage your stress. And I always found it humorous in higher education, how we always did stress management programs the week of exams. Cause I'm kind of like, dude, like, I'm not really sure if that's the time we want to start learning and implementing new skills in the most stressed out time. We don't learn to hit a fastball in the World Series. We learn to hit a fastball because somebody put us in a tee in the backyard and had fun and then did soft toss. And then at some point you were at a ballpark with like 4 family members, right? Like, we have opportunities in that integrative approach to really help people make changes that are sustainable in their lives. And so, yeah, I don't want to get off on a tangent there about the siloed approach that we see sometimes with the promotional. Oh, this is the deck on stress management. But I do come to really value that the integrative way.
Yeah, I think everything that you shared, all the results that come from sports psychology, you mentioned Major League Baseball being able to last 2 more years. And I think all these implementations, they really do connect to the workplace and can have equally substantial results. And I'm so excited to have our listeners hear this and see how they can implement this better in their workplaces, especially maybe those smaller organizations that don't have a specific person already allotted to this. So thank you so much for your expertise today and all that you shared. We want our listeners to listen, and we'll have some resources in our highlight article for you. And just please subscribe, and you won't miss any more episodes. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And we're grateful for you sharing your expertise. Any last words as we close up here?
I'm just grateful for you both. I mean, I mentioned that last performance tenet, relationships are the agent of change. And I love doing programs like this, podcasts, because reality is, like, I learned from you guys as well. So I'm grateful for you both, and thank you for having me.
Well, thanks,
Thank you,
Amy.
Amy.
Awesome.
And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit Podcast, and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.